Welcome, everybody. Welcome to ParentGauge 2.0, Elevating Head Start Programs to New Heights. While you're connecting to audio and logging in, a couple of housekeeping items. You are entering in on mute, but this is interactive. So if you have any questions or comments along the way, use that chat functionality at the bottom of your Zoom window. By all means, go ahead and use it now if you'd like to introduce yourself and where you're logging in from. I'm Sandy Oseguera, and I'm logging in today from Salt Lake City. And I'll let Lucretia introduce herself as well.
Hello there. My name is Lucretia Delgado. I am the consultant for ParentGauge, and I am logging in from Gilroy, California.
Nice. Both of us are on the West Coast over here. The rest of NHSA is on the East Coast. And I'm the product manager. I don't think I've mentioned that. So a lot of the time I'm focusing on like the behind the scenes of ParentGauge. So we're really excited today to talk about ParentGauge and a lot of, we're going to go over an overview of what ParentGauge is, how you move around through it. So if you're new to ParentGauge, we'll give you some insight on what it is, where it came from, how to use it. We're also going to highlight the new features and enhancements that we've made with ParentGauge and equip you with the knowledge to use ParentGauge to engage with families and staff, leverage those new features to enhance your family engagement efforts, and provide insights into upcoming developments in ParentGauge. You will receive a follow-up email to this webinar that's going to contain a recording to that. And if anybody is logging in and didn't hear me before, you are entering in mute, but you can use that chat functionality if you have any questions along the way. Let's see. So ParentGauge, its main purpose is to facilitate a heart-to-heart conversation between program staff and parents so that we can strengthen that relationship and hear directly from parents what their strengths are. Then we can use that information to inform program efforts around parent, family, and community engagement. So the interview itself is a family engagement effort, right? That's going to be a family engagement activity. And then we can use that data to impact program efforts. ParentGauge was a direct reaction to the Office of Head Start introducing the PFCE framework. When that framework was introduced, programs actually came to NHSA asking for a tool that can help with adoption. And as a way, a lot of programs were also looking for a way to measure PFCE efforts, right? Because when we're looking at measuring family outcomes, family well-being, how we measure positive parent-child relationships and the impact of those. It's not easy to quantify those things. So we created ParentGauge as a way to measure those things. So the ParentGauge questions, the assessment questions themselves are based off of that blue family outcomes questions column here in the PFCE framework. And so the questions themselves have the overall goal of maintaining positive and goal-oriented relationships. And so with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Lucretia to show us around in the tool.
Okay. So lots of great changes that we've made onto 2.0. We're very excited to share them with you. It took us about a year. We went ahead and we talked with a lot of programs, just asking them what kind of changes, what difficulties are you seeing with the questions the way they are now? How can we help to make it an easier process for the interviewers to ask the families and for the families to respond? So when you create an interview, you have a place right here to enter all of the information that is required for the particular interview, especially evaluation, which there's initial, mid-year, and post. We'll go into that in just a moment. Your language, you can choose whichever language that works best. This is not where it changes the language. We'll show you that in just a second. But by entering the correct language here, this allows you to filter and pull when you're doing your reports. If you want to drill down and see how are our for instance, Spanish-speaking families doing as compared to our English-speaking families? So that is why we have that little red asterisk there and the reason for the language in that place. You have 3 evaluation periods, and each program can set up their own course of which evaluations they want to use, be it all 3 or just 2. Lots of programs vary and do it differently. Our initial evaluation is generally done for any brand new families or directly at the very beginning of the term year. When you're doing the initial, it only asks the family questions. It does not ask the program questions. The reason for that is if the family hasn't been with the program long enough, they're not going to know how they feel about certain things. This is your opportunity to see where the family is so that you know where to start engagement. Mid-year and post, they are identical. They include both the family questions as well as the program questions. And the reason why they're identical is because these are the 2 that you're going to use for your growth reports. So if by, let's just say wintertime, you do your mid-year, and at the end of the year, you do your post, now you have comparisons. Here's where we were in our mid-year. How were we looking? Here's, we tried to put in a few things to make changes to see if we could increase scores. How did we do on the post? Your growth report is going to allow you to be able to review that with great flexibility. And we'll get more into that in just a bit. So we can go ahead. Okay. And here is the slide with the language. So up at the top, you see that it's been circled in red. If you need to change the language, this is the place to do so. We have 4. We have English, Spanish, French, and Arabic. We are discussing possibilities of more later down the road, but for now, these are the 4 that we currently have. You'll notice that if you look a little lower, it says language English, and that language is what you had put when you were originally submitting and setting up the interview. You can double check to make sure that you've got the correct evaluation going on. The center is pulled. Everything is there for you. Status incomplete. This is one of the things that I love about this is that once you click submit to start an interview, your status is already set. At no point do you need to click save. So regardless of whether you don't have your laptop with you and you started something and have to stop it and have to go back to it, wherever you left off, it saves it for you automatically. We do have record audio. If you are recording this, say on your phone so that you can catch certain things, this is where you could upload it. If you take your laptop or your tablet, you can record the interview directly here. The important thing to note is that it is not talk to text, something we're thinking about, but the reason why we have this on here is because it can be very beneficial. If you do the interview in person, and let's say you do it off of a printed form and you record it, anything that you weren't able to capture at the beginning of the interview, you can listen to this, be able to put it on and follow through with notes on the assessment. Our interview intro has been updated. You are welcome to do it verbatim. You can change it however you like if you need to, but it does help to emphasize the reason for the interview for the families to understand that this is not the interviewers getting into certain things that maybe they would feel uncomfortable about. We want them to have a good experience, a comfortable experience. And so we've tried to word it so that they feel that right from the very beginning. There is an open-ended question and a closed-ended question. Both of these are, for the most part, very generalized. Again, it's just an opening or an icebreaker. It allows them to be able to get started into the conversation. You'll notice at the top that you see sections. All of these sections here are based off the PFCE requirements. So families in transitions. Again, this is a great one. This, if you have a child that is either heading into Head Start from early Head Start or is graduating to kindergarten, this section is great for that. As you can see, we put in a lot of depth into the beginning of this section to help facilitate what it is you're looking for, where you're going. We've also added in about skipping any questions that you feel uncomfortable with. We've explained why these questions are being asked and why they're paired the way they are. This makes it much easier for the families to feel comfortable when they're first starting the interview, so that they understand the reason behind the questions. Okay, so the child details. Now, on the child details there are 4 questions. And before, we had the problem of a lot of programs would forget to enter this information or update it depending. So if an IEP was added to a child before the interview was started, but they didn't update it in the system, then those questions wouldn't pull. So we have made it so that it is much simpler for you. If you forget to update or enter these questions, it is no longer an issue for it to pull on the interview. We have gone ahead and added them in. There are, I believe, 5 of these questions. They are highlighted in gray, and they say specifically what to do so that there's no question. It says, if not skip, we ask that you please click the skip button. That way if you just breeze past it, you're going to get a not answered response on your reports. And we want to make sure that you skip it so that we know that it did not pertain at the time. Now, even though these are here, the reason why these questions are still on the child's details is so that when you are doing any kind of filtering on your reports, by having those answered on the child's details, those filters will pull over into your reports. The wonderful thing is, if you forget and you go to pull those reports and you're missing some because you didn't have those child details pulled, you can go back now and change that without having to worry about redoing an interview because the questions weren't there. It's a big change for us, and we were very, very excited about it. All of the questions have been looked at so closely and made not only to be user-friendly in English, but also to translate better into the other languages. What we have done has taken some of these questions and amended them so that they are more open and friendlier to ask. It makes it so much easier on the interviewers, and it makes it much easier on the family so that they can respond in a very good way. If you look number 11, I feel comfortable speaking up for my child's educational needs. This pertains directly to families as advocates and leadership that goes with that PFCE framework. I know how to participate in my program's volunteer and parent activities. This is grounded and more specific instead of a general, do you know to go to activities? By doing it this way, we're making sure that the families know how to participate. They know how to get in touch with someone regarding volunteer work or attending something. And they also can reflect that they're given those opportunities. They know that they've been reached out to. We're very excited about the changes in the way the questions are worded. Without becoming a Parent Gauge nerd, it's hard not to jump up and down in my seat when I talk about it because so much thought went into it. We talked with a lot of programs, first at the very beginning before we made any changes, and then afterwards to make sure that they felt that what we had done was going to be more cohesive and working within what it was they were asking us for. Every section ends with an open-ended question. This is a new one that we've added in this particular, the health and nutrition section. There are 2 open-ended questions. This is a new one asking about basic needs, any support that the family needs. Besides putting in the response, you can also just add a little asterisk and put in a note so that you can know yourself if there's something you need to do, such as giving an address for a local food bank that is closest to the family, that kind of thing. The open-ended sections are probably my favorite because the way we have changed those questions, they used to be so generalized that it was hard to get an honest, good response of what it was you were looking for. Now they're open-ended, but they're geared more specifically towards that particular section. And that is going to allow you to get specific detailed information on that family as to what it is they are looking for. And that's going to help you to determine patterns or specific individual needs. The patterns can be center-wide based, they can be program-wide based. It's just really going to make a big change in the way that you're going to get your responses. When you are done and you are finished, your status will stay incomplete until you mark it complete. You never have to worry about it cutting off or not being able to finish entering, or it saving it as completed before you are, although you can go in and mark it. You can, if it's marked complete, you can go in and change that if you need to. But there's always an opportunity for you to do what it is you need to do in there. Lots of flexibility. So those are our main changes. We're based on the open-ended questions, the way they are made to be more concise. The closed-ended questions were looked on to be friendlier. Some of the questions have been moved over to where we felt they fit better within a certain section of the PFCE framework so that they would flow easier for you. And with having said all this, I'm going to change it over to Sandy so she can tell you how it all comes into play.
Thanks, Lucretia. So by the end of any one of these interviews, you know, you've had this sit down with a family, and realistically, each of your family service workers or teachers, whoever's sitting down and doing these interviews, they're doing, you know, a couple dozen, usually, maybe more. And your program is probably doing a couple hundred, maybe more than that sometime, and depending on your program size. And within Parent Gauge, we see about 40,000 every year. So we're getting a lot of data collected throughout those interviews. You know, that heart-to-heart conversation and those engagement efforts are building those connections and relationships through that process. But we're also getting a lot of data there also that provides a lot of individual program insight and also a national benchmarking opportunities as well. So that's an opportunity for us to dig into so that we can see what's going on. Are there any parent engagement trends that we can look into with these huge data sets that we're collecting? So within Parent Gauge, there's a couple of reports that you can dig into program-wide. The first one being the baseline report. So this is something that if you're a Parent Gauge subscriber, you already have access to. The baseline report is the very first one. This one is you can pull up after, I mean, really even after a single interview, but it's most effective when you have like a first round of interviews or a season of interviews. The baseline report is a good overview of results from all questions. When you log into a baseline report, you'll see these first two scales. But every question is either going to be focused on parents or program impact. And so these scales are taking each question or basically grouping those questions and giving you an overall score. So all of our parent questions are in this average, or all of our programs questions are in this average. So we're just taking them all and averaging them together here. And we're getting a 3.7 and a 3.9 for this particular data set. This is demo data, so take these particular numbers with a grain of salt. And then the baseline report then looks at every single question and is giving you an average based off of every family that responded to that question. So here we see a couple of those responses. It's going to break down every single question for you so that we can see the average for each one. If we want to get even more granular, you can actually dig into each question. Here we have an average of a 3.87 for this particular question or statement. I feel comfortable speaking up for my child's educational needs. We get an overall average of 3.87. And in ParentGauge, if you click on to that statement, you can see that for this particular data set, we have a total responses of 60. So we had 60 families respond to this question, and that average is 3.87. And our scale is from very much to not at all on the a matter of agreeance there. And then it breaks it down even further. So we can see how many of our families said that they agree very much. I could click on to that and see exactly which families said very much. So those 19 families would be listed out for me. I could do the same with the 23 that said mostly. And then there's 18 families altogether that ranked that lower. So if I'm an admin, I might want to dig into that further and click onto that one family that scored the lowest there, that said that they're that said not at all. Maybe they're a new family to the program, or maybe I see something in common with all of these families that ranked this the lowest. Maybe there are non-English speaking families and I want to reach out to them in particular, or aim some resources at them. So there's a lot that you can do with this information, and you can get really granular down to the family level if you start digging into each of these particular questions. You could even dig down deeper to these reports by using those filter options. Like Lucretia mentioned when she was pointing out those child detail pages, when you're using those child level responses, those child details, you can put, whether that child has an IEP, or if they are transitioning through to, like if it's their last year of Head Start, or if they're transitioning between early Head Start to Head Start. You can also filter by site, classroom, the family service worker. So if you're a family service worker, you can look at just the interviews that you're doing, native language, those kinds of things. You can break down your reports by any of those indicators so that you can look at just those data sets. Or if you're an administrator, you might want to look at comparisons between those data sets so that you can see, are there any differences between this particular center to this one? Maybe this center is doing really well in a particular area, and I want to see how are they doing that so that I can spread that around. That might be something to focus in on. I think one breakdown that I see pretty often is a breakdown between our native languages, because there's some programs that want to make sure that all of our families are getting the same impact from the program. And that's one place that they want to see it, is that are our non-English speaking families getting the same level of care as our English speaking families? So they'll see if that same impact is being felt by breaking down those reports. We have another report in ParentGauge called the growth report. And so that one's going to have a lot of the same metrics as well. You can see those same scales, the parent scales and the program scales broken out here, and that same breakdown of a question here. We're only showing one on this particular one, but you'll notice that there's double the amount of scales. And that's because the growth report is measuring the growth between 2 periods of time. So here we're seeing 2022 to 2023 in the mid-year and post. So we're saying at the end of the year. So we're comparing the parent and program scales to the middle of the year and at the end of the year, or basically after the program. And we can see that things went overall, the scales went up. But if we looked at just this first question, we can see that this red arrow here is showing a downward trend just to that first question. So there was a decrease in how our families scored this first question. And it would do the same thing for all of our questions. So overall, our families did have higher scores overall in how they scored this assessment. But for that first question, there was a lower score. And that was that first transition, or that when I started with the program, the staff tried to learn about my family's interests and concerns. That red arrow is going to trigger anytime there's more than a half a point difference. So you'll see that arrow either show green and that it's going up, things have increased, or a red arrow that it's decreased. And then if you were to click on that, you might see that maybe there's less families that answered that question because there were less transitions. That could be something that happens. Maybe there's been changes because there's less, like this particular question, the staff tried to learn about my family. Maybe we didn't have as much staff trying to learn about family because there's been less new families. So that might be something that you would expect to see. So by all means, these reports will give you some insight. And then once you start digging in, there may be things that you ultimately expect to see. And then overall, like we see here, scores increased. So might not be a cause for concern. That the red arrows and the green arrows, when you see those changes, that is something that has changed from the past. Before, they were triggered based on average decrease or increases or changes. Now it's always going to be at that half point difference is when you'll see that arrow pop up. So that is something that's been changed so that it's just simpler across the board when you pull up your own growth reports. Those same filter options are also available for the growth report. So those filter options that we mentioned in the previous slide, those are all available here as well. So you can break down these reports by the same metrics that we talked about before. So you can still break this down by language. You can still pull this out by family service worker, by interviewer, by site, whatever you'd like. You can still slice and dice this report in the same way. Now, once a year, we'll also send out national results via snapshot worksheet. We sent that out a couple months ago. We've also sent out an updated one with the new questions as well. So if you have been a subscriber, you should have the one for the 23-24 year already. But basically what we do is once a year, we're going to send you out the national averages so that you can see for each question, how did we rank across the national averages. So for this particular question, I make sure my child receives regular dental care. You can see my program average is 4.8. That's for the national average, I'm at the 75th percentile. So you can see, is that the norm? Yes, more or less. And we can see, okay, things are looking pretty good there. And you can get a good idea of where we're averaging across the nation. And we'll do that about once a year. And typically you can get a good idea there. It is a worksheet that comes out typically over the summer. All of your data in Parent Gauge is available for you to download at any time. So within those reports, the baseline and growth report, you'll see a download button in the corner, and you'll be able to download a CSV Excel sheet there. That is available anytime. There's never additional charges for you to pull out that full data download. It'll pull out all of your data for at least 5 years. You can also, in that Excel report, pull out all of your open-ended question results. You'll notice our canned reports in ParentGauge are all focused on your quantitative data. The qualitative data, right, there's not as many averages that we can pull out of that kind of thing. So your open-ended results will be listed here in a row or a column in that Excel sheet. So you'll be able to pull all of those there. You can also, we have a lot of programs that also use that data set to do additional reporting. So there might be something in Excel that you'll use to do other trend reports or things like that based off of that CSV upload or that you'll do from those reports screens in ParentGauge. In fact, those open-ended responses are some of the most fun. That's where we can see exactly what our parents are saying directly to us. I've seen some programs plug those open-ended responses into AI platforms like ChatGPT, though I will say you do want to be careful using any of those services because sometimes parents are putting in personal identifying information that you don't want to necessarily plug into something like ChatGPT. But I'll see programs plug in, those columns of open-ended responses to get common themes or sometimes to make word clouds so that they can see what the common themes are to those open-ended responses. So these quotes that you see on your screen here, they're all real quotes I pulled from this year's interviews. Very regularly, we're seeing shout outs to staff, ideas for your programs, lots of parents who want to share directly with their programs, who they think are doing a good job, ideas of activities that they want to do. During COVID, we saw parents' concerns or ideas that they thought might work for still having engagement efforts. Sometimes there's things coming up for parents that they want to bring up that might not be on our radars yet, but they're on their parents' radar. So those open-ended responses are always really fun. It's also full of things that you can use for pull quotes. Sometimes I see programs using them for when they're making their own newsletters or want to give staff kudos. These are places where you can find that because very often that's where parents are giving their feedback. It does a really good job of highlighting where, so one of our missions at Head Start is, relying on parents for their expertise of their families. And this is a place where you can really see that because they'll give us their feedback and really their expertise on their families in these areas. And you can really showcase that. So like I said, these are real quotes here. Like I said, one of the things to keep an eye on if you do rely on any third-party software for it is just keeping an eye out for any personal identifying data because that is something that we do see pretty often there. Now, all of the data that you pull from ParentGauge can be used in a variety of ways. Obviously, you can use it to inform your parent engagement efforts. You can track and analyze family outcome goals with concrete metrics. You can identify trends across sites in different time periods, make data-driven decisions about resource allocation, to plan parent night activities and events. We did add a question where we ask parents what kind of parent night activities and events they're interested in. So now you'll have that data directly in those open-ended responses as well. You can use the data to target support, so you can pinpoint specific areas where families need additional support from their individual interviews. You can segment data by demographics or other relevant factors to make sure all of our families are feeling supported, enable proactive response to emerging family needs, and you can celebrate wins with individual families or staff when you see growth. We've had a couple programs who pull up their ParentGauge interview with individual families where they'll pull up the initial interview or their mid-year interview at the end of the year so that they can see the goals that they had made earlier in the year and talk about it at the end of the year so that we can see all the growth that they made. So it's something that you can do as a family service worker. You can pull up those individual wins there, or as an admin, you can look at, your program wins that way. We've also seen Parent Gauge data used for stakeholder engagement and funding. You know, these data narratives are used to report back to the Office of Head Start around PFCE efforts and continuous quality improvement, as well as to support grant applications and approach your representatives. So this can demonstrate program impact through quantifiable outcomes. You can also benchmark your program against national averages and identify areas of excellence and opportunities for improvement. So you can learn from successful practices across the Parent Gauge community. Now, with all of that in mind, you know, we've made a lot of changes this year. We are always looking for new things to do as well. I see a couple of people that are logged in today who have given us some of the ideas that we've ran with this year that have informed some of these questions that we've updated and some of the feature enhancements that we've made. We are still trying to continually optimize Parent Gauge. Some of the things that we're working on right now are custom questions. That's probably one of the biggest requests we've gotten for Parent Gauge is, you know, this is a tool that's used across the nation. We have a lot of communities that have particular needs. So there's questions that are very individualized to some communities. And so we are testing out that functionality now. We have that in beta mode, which means that we have the functionality built in, but it's kind of behind a secret flag. So we're testing it out right now. That is something that some of our programs are already testing out with us. If you're interested, if you're a subscriber, you can test that out with us. You know, it's basically like it's still in testing mode, so there might be some I don't want to call it bugs because we're, you know, but basically we're still testing it out. It's not perfect yet. But if you're interested in testing that out with us, let us know. We're down to let you try it out with us, and you get to help us design it as we're doing that. So reach out if you want to help us test that out. But as we get that streamlined, we'll have that out available for everybody. We also are working on bringing in CSV uploads. So right now, when you're uploading your rosters, if you have Child Plus, it's a pretty straightforward process. There's a Child Plus report that you upload. If you're using other softwares, there is a manual process to those roster uploads. You're basically not uploading them. You're having to do a manual process to bring them in. But we're adding in a CSV upload where you could upload a standard CSV. Probably see that within the next couple months. I don't want to give a definite timeline, but that's coming soon. We're also starting to play around with a talk to text functionality. That is probably later on down the road, but that is something that we're currently working on. And when that comes through, we're also hoping that there'll be some translation transcription with that as well. So that one I was expecting that it would take longer, but we're actually looking like that might be further, or I'm sorry, sooner around the corner than initially expected. One that's maybe less exciting, but but it's exciting if it's been an issue for you, but is the center inactivations. If you're a program where your site names or your center names are changing, or you know they fluctuate, that has been something where you end up with these long lists of old center names in some areas. We are making that easier, so that is currently in process. I think you'll see that sooner than later. So those are a couple of things that are around the corner that you'll probably see within this next year of Parent Gauge. So keep that in mind, and I'll turn it to Lucretia to tell us a little bit more of the other things that we have on the docket.
Thank you, Sandy. Well, this one isn't in Parent Gauge, but it is a part of Parent Gauge. This is our baby right now. Parent Gauge Plus. This is a monthly newsletter that we send out to anyone who has an email set up in Parent Gauge. So if you are signed up for Parent Gauge, you should be getting your newsletter. The newsletter is a wonderful place where we can give all kinds of information. The first section is called In the Know. This is where we will be updating you on any changes that we're doing within ParentGauge. If we are seeing a technical blip, we'll put it in there and let you know so that you're aware of it. We'll let you know when it's been fixed. All of these good things, and then upcoming things as well, will be included in the Know. We also have another section that is directly set up called Spotlight. And within that, we will be highlighting certain things that maybe you didn't know about ParentGauge, such as sampling is one that we've got coming up in a couple of months, where we will get further and deeper into that detail without being too burdensome of getting that information to you. The next section, and this is our absolute favorite, is program to program. And what we do within this is highlight any information that we get from other programs, and we add it so that you can share it. This is our way of putting together a community for ParentGauge users, where we can bounce ideas off each other, share things that are working, even ask questions of other programs for things that maybe you're struggling with. It's an open forum, so if you are interested in participating, you can reach out to ParentGauge at nhsa.org with any specific thoughts, ideas, questions, shout outs, anything great that you have done. We want to hear about it, and we want to put it in there with you. It's a quick less than 5-minute read. It only comes out once a month. It's not too overburdening, but it is chock full of good things to share. And so if you would like to learn more, either about the newsletter, subscription services, if you have training and support needs, if you want a demonstration of ParentGauge, or just have basic questions, always reach out to us. You know, we're always happy to help and to be there. So thank you so much for that. And I know that we have some good questions going on here. And I saw one in particular. I didn't respond to it. I was saving it for Sandy. That doesn't sound nice, does it? Okay. Sarah had a question. Is there a research base or evidence behind the ParentGauge you can cite or share?
Oh, that is a good question. So when we first started ParentGauge, it was the team over at the University of Chicago. We teamed up with their research department, and they actually used what is it called? When they do they sat down with it was a large number of families, and to talk through what was important to the families. And they actually ran a large language model research project to identify what were the most popular or most common themes of what's important to families. And they used that to model the first set of questions. Now, since then, we did just change the questions, not entirely. So there is still some of those questions hanging around, but we have since updated those questions. They did an initial psychometric validation of those initial questions. We didn't do that same validation of the second set. Instead, we went out to the field and validated it with the field and interviewers to see that this is what makes sense to the field. And instead, so that initial validation wasn't done on this newest set of questions, but that was how the initial research was done, and where those were initially done and the evidence behind those. And there is, I can share that initial article, but like I said, the new questions, it's like they were based off of that, but they weren't the same evidence wasn't, or I'm sorry, the same exact research wasn't done to back these newest questions up. Instead, we went to the field and to our user base. And then we have another question also I see. Is there a way we can separate the questions in the qualitative category? I can take that one also, Lucretia, but I wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to jump in.
Oh, oh, no worries at all. Actually, Tiara had replied back that you had answered that question when you went over the reports.
Oh,
So she's all
cool.
set, but if you want to just review it real quick, just to help everyone out, that would be lovely.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's basically in the download data, the data download that you can get from the report screen. They are broken up there. When you do that download, you'll see that each column, it basically each question is broken out in its own column. So it is naturally broken out there, and then you can take it further because it's an Excel sheet. So you'll be able to break it out any further that you want to as well. And to see if there were any other questions. Oh, is there a projected date for the custom questions? Now, that's something that with if anybody else works on technology with their in their program, you know, that projected dates for feature updates and things like that. It's a dangerous game because just when you think there's a date that you can give, something will happen. But like I said, there custom questions, the beta version is out there. So if you want to start using it, you can. We can basically we'll turn it on for your program. Just know that it is a test version. So right now we're still trying to get like the design of it to look just right. There might still be some kinks in there. The final version, when we turn it on for everybody, that's probably not going to happen at least for another 6 months, just as we get everything streamlined. So probably at least 6 months. I'm giving that much of a buffer just to make sure. But yeah, if that's something that you want sooner, it is out there. It's just that it, like I said, we're still streamlining everything there. And if you have any other questions, feel free to, we still have a little bit of time to chat them in. But Lucretia and I do have a question for y'all while we have everybody here. Because
Yes.
as you can see, I think one thing that we've really shifted into within this last year is that we really love the ideas coming from our subscribers, from our audience, because I think when we have been making changes to the Parent Gauge, some of the best changes have come from our user base and from people who are out there interacting with parents directly. So we'd love to hear from y'all, whether you're a subscriber or you're using other surveys or software products. Are there any capabilities you wish your current parent assessments could do? Or is there anything that they're not doing right now that you wish they did? Feel free to chat those in now.
Yeah, sky's the limit. We want to hear
Yeah,
the most outrageous things.
yeah, take out all of the practicality of it.
Yes, yes. There's no practicality in this whatsoever.
More languages, yes. We know
We
that.
hear you.
Yeah, I know there was one program I think that we visited in Virginia where they said their program served families that spoke 23 languages, and I was like, wow,
Wow.
that's huge.
Anybody else have a pie in the sky one? I mean, Sandy and I even have a few of our own that we want to
Mhm.
be able to do. Besides the talk to text, we'd like it to actually incorporate on an app so that if you're doing talk to text, it can be done from an app on your phone, which would make it easier for everyone. What are some of the other ones that we were spitballing together?
Yeah, I know one that comes up when I have talked to users has been we know that there's families out there that no matter how much you try to sit down with them, they don't they're not as responsive to that sit down interview. So if there was a capability to do like a virtual survey, and you know, for Parent Gauge, we do this is we want that family engagement piece, but we've been talking about, the potential of having like a separate area where these are our virtual surveys, and that way we could compare them separately. So we've been talking about that functionality and having, how that would integrate with things. That's been something that we've talked about because we know that there's a demand for that. So that's something we've been
Yeah.
talking about on our end.
And another one too was a separate interview for prenatal. Um, we we know that a lot of families, especially if you're very EHS centered, there could be the prenatal requirement, and it's not on there. Although I do want to say that if you do need questions for prenatal, our specialized question section may help facilitate that. So there is, I would call that possibly a workaround, but just to have a separate, completely separate assessment for prenatal is something that we have talked about as well. We've got one up here. Sarah has put in, I'm new to the entire parent gauge, and since it's online, need clarification. Do advocates send families the link to fill out at home, or do they sit down with them while a family completes it? Or does the staff ask the questions and the family gives them an answer and the staff fills it out? Very great question. And the answer is each program does it a little bit differently. Most programs do a sit down. They either do it during a conference or they do it at the home, especially EHS, where they're doing home visits anyway. There is not a link for the families to fill out. The only people that can enter and get into the interviews are the staff that are signed into Parent Gauge. We do have some families that, like Sandy was saying, you just can't connect with. We have a few programs that will print it out and send it to them and then do a follow-up phone call after they've gotten the responses. But there's always a connection with the families when using Parent Gauge, and because that's its reasoning. That's why we're doing it. We want that connection. We want that information. We want them to feel heard. So hopefully that answers your question there. Anybody else have any questions or anything that they'd really like to see? Oh, you want to take, Isaiah's on here with us. Hello. Go ahead, take it, Sandy.
Yeah, and Dr. Santa, you're who I was thinking about when I said there's some people in the audience that I know I've listened to when some of these questions have come up, or the updates that we've made. Yeah, because your suggestions have been amazing, and I agree that like if in regards to working with diversity and inclusion, that we should add some questions about that. That's a great idea. I think that is something that we should think about adding in some questions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
And we do have some programs that are baiting with us that they are using it for diversity and culture so that they can ask specific questions regarding the cultures that they are assisting so that they get that feedback. Reservations is a very prime example of ones that would want to use that for that purpose. So absolutely.
yeah, we'll have to ask you more about that later.
Yeah, because
Get more
you can go
ideas about
so
that.
deep, or we can generalize the diversity questions. And if we're going to go deep, do we keep it on the personal question section? I mean, just spitballing and working it out. This is why you guys are so important to us. These kind of questions really help us to get our juices flowing and get everything all squared away. So thank you. Oh, we still have a few more minutes. Anything else? Throw something at us. I don't care if it's, can we do them from space? Let's see your questions. The answer to that, by the way, right now is no. Unless you're doing a Zoom call, which is bounced off a satellite.
All All right, gang. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, this is always really insightful for us as well. We love to hear from y'all. If there are any other questions, by all means, reach out to us. The ParentGauge email, both Lucretia and I are always in that inbox, so feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, if you'd like to take a look at ParentGauge, if you're not a subscriber, or if you are and you have any questions or need any assistance on anything that we talked about today, let us know. Thank you again for joining us and for your insight today. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you have any, if you're brand new and you want more information regarding ParentGauge, especially reach out to us because we would be glad to show you not just a demonstration, but also a presentation to help understand the heart of it. So